pretty song. God is within me. Say that together. God is within me. And look around. God is within you and you and you. Say that. Go ahead. Go ahead. And a little more convincingly, please. God is within me. God is within you and you and you and you and you. And even in those folks that we call lovingly sandpaper to our soul. Sandpaper to our soul. This morning is part 2 in a 4-part series, and it is a series of taking a look at 12 steps to reclaiming our life. And we are looking today at how to dig deeper within ourselves that we might soar freer and higher and go further in our lives. This series is grounded in the 12 steps as taught in the program of Alcoholics Anonymous. And within our Unity community, we do have many members who are part of AA or GA or NA or OA, and forgive me if I've left out any of the other aspects of the recovery movement. I know Al-Anon and so forth. And certainly we have members who are actively engaged in the program. And we have lots of us in this room that are not part of any 12-step group. And yet, what I want to do in this series is showcase the efficacy and value and applicability and the soundness of these concepts presented in the 12 steps for all of us. Because actually, they're rooted, I believe, in healthy spiritual practice and living. And so we're going to take a look today at some of the more rigorous steps, if you will, steps 4, 5, 6, and 7. And we're going to look at what does that mean for us as we begin to dig deeper inside, that we might be able to let go of the stuff that we know is holding us back so that we can live more of the life that our soul and God is inviting us to step into. Before we take a look, though, at steps 4, 5, and 6, and 7, I do want to put forth a little bit of a disclaimer. And that is that in the same way in unity, we say that though there is one God, called by many different names, there are any variety of paths, any variety of religions that when honestly practiced can help one to awaken to the God presence within and all around. That there is no such thing as one right way to the exclusion of all others. And the disclaimer here is that while there is a tremendous amount of wisdom and practicality to be found in these 12 steps of recovery, they are not the only path to recovery for the alcoholic or anyone who is abusing any other form of substance. So does that make sense? There are many paths. It's really about working the path. Working the path. It is a way of life. We say in Unity that unity is a way of life. It's not enough just to know these things. We must do and become these things. Okay, so step 4, 5, 6, and 7. Step 4, made a searching and fearless moral inventory of ourselves. Step 5, admitted to God, to ourselves, and to another human being the exact nature of our wrongs. Step number 6, we're entirely ready to have God remove all these defects of character. And number 7, humbly asked him to remove our shortcomings. So step number 4, made a searching and fearless moral inventory of ourselves. Breathe into that for a moment. Sounds like heavy lifting, doesn't it? Heavy lifting, made a searching and fearless moral inventory of ourselves. It is about a fact-finding and fact-facing mission of self-discovery. We know that what we are unwilling to look at, what we are unwilling to examine, is going to hold us hostage. The truth of the matter is that within each and every one of us is a spark of the divine. Within each and every one of us is the God potential, the God seed. If you've been in unity for any length of time, you know that in unity we believe in original blessing, not in original sin. Original sin is a church teaching, a church doctrine. We take very seriously the statement in the first chapter of Genesis that we are made in the image and after the likeness of God, that we are born in original blessing, not in original sin. However, it does not imply, it does not mean that there is not room for improvement. It does not ignore the fact that we've got some things, each and every one of us, to work on. Is that not true? Absolutely it is. I remember fondly Reverend Sue Sicking, a long-time unity minister, no longer with us, who used to say that the greatest room, the largest room in the universe, was the room for improvement. And I think she's right. What we know is if we can't change certain behaviors within us, then we're destined to repeat our past. This step of taking a fearless and moral inventory of ourselves is about acknowledging our mistakes, acknowledging our shortcomings. Why? So we can begin the process of transcending them, so we can begin the process of learning from them, so we can begin the process of moving beyond them. I remember reading about a boys' choir in Chicago that did very, very well, won lots of awards, and the choir director made a practice, taught the boys that whenever they were learning a piece of music and they became aware that they made a mistake, that he wanted them to just raise their hand and continue on singing with everybody else, because he wanted them to feel comfortable in acknowledging their mistakes. He wanted them to be aware when they made a mistake, so that hopefully in that safe environment of acknowledging their mistakes, they could learn from those mistakes, free themselves from them, and learn the part better. Wouldn't it be great to live in a world where we all, when we caught ourselves making a mistake, just raised our hand and said, "Oops, I made a mistake"? Can you imagine corporate America being such a safe place that employees could say, "Oops, I didn't mean to, but I really messed up here. I made a mistake, and here's what I've learned, and here's how I think I can do better next time"? Do you think over the long run we would create more successful businesses? I do. Do you think we would create or facilitate healthier, happier people? Of course we would. Of course we would. We are foolish, or we are in absolute denial, if we do not acknowledge that each and every one of us, no matter how much progress we've made personally, professionally, or in any other way, that we do make mistakes. And making it safe to acknowledge that is important. It, to me, is the fourth step for all the rest of us. Being willing to take an inventory of that, being willing to own that. Why don't we? I think probably the greatest reason, the most common reason that we don't go, "Oops, I made a mistake," is because we still seem to live in a society that focuses on perfection and doesn't allow us to be our authentic selves. And so we hide. If we goof, we mess up, we don't want anybody to see because we don't want to be judged, we don't want to be criticized, we don't want to lose our jobs maybe, we don't want to lose love, we don't want to lose the big A, approval, right? Perfection, striving for perfection, I believe, kills any chance of true excellence. When I strive for perfection in anywhere in my life, I wind up becoming self-conscious, inhibited, and I wind up not being able to advance. Why? Because the illusion of perfection keeps me on such a very narrow path, driven in a way by fear that constricts me. I remember early on in my ministry trying so hard for each and every talk I gave to be perfect. And what I noticed is whenever I really made it about the talk being perfect, I would always get in my own way. I would always crowd out any opportunity for God to speak through me with a way better idea than whatever I would have thought of. And somehow in the striving to do it perfectly, I didn't make the same connection with you. And those times when I was aware after the fact, boy, that wasn't so perfect. It was okay, Wendy, but it wasn't perfect. Invariably, you would say to me in the line, oh my God, you really reached me today. And eventually, I drew the conclusion that, oh, when I make it more about trying to get it perfect, I get in my own way. I get in my own way. Can you think of examples in your own life where maybe that same kind of tendency is causing you to get in your own way, and in a way is causing you not to be able to advance and do better in that very thing? So taking this fearless moral inventory is in part being willing to look more honestly and authentically at ourselves. Hugh Prather, the New Thought writer, wrote, "Unless I accept my faults, I will most certainly doubt my virtues." Isn't that good? Unless I accept my faults, I will most certainly doubt my virtues. One of the fun things about presenting a series based on the 12 steps in a community where there are so many people who are actively engaged in the 12 steps and know far more firsthand about them than I do, is I've gotten some really good feedback, and I want to sprinkle this message today with some of it. One of our members shared with me last Sunday that he could summarize the 12 steps in 3 basic ideas, 3 basic concepts. That it is all about, number 1, trusting God. It's all about cleaning house, which is really what steps 4 and 5 are definitely about. Trusting God, cleaning house, and helping others. Wouldn't you want to live in a world where we were all motivated by that? I want to live in that kind of world. I want to create a community that's more like that, where together we trust God, that there's a higher presence and power at work in our lives, in our world, in each other. Trusting God, cleaning house. And I don't just mean physically cleaning your house, obviously, but owning our own stuff. You know, it's very healthy in relationships where there's a problem or an upset and you think it's all about the other person. I know you've never had that experience, but hang with me for a minute. Asking yourself, hey, what's my part in this? How have I contributed to where we've gotten in our relationship? How have I contributed to this mistake, this problem, this challenge? What's also been shared with me, a couple of different things, is that many times in this step 4, the focus is on defects. And in fact, the language sometimes is used in step 4 to take a fearless moral inventory of one's personal defects. Last week, after I spoke a little bit about the first couple of steps, one of our members, a therapist, shared a really good idea with me that I want to share with you. And I asked her to follow it up with an email. She said, in traditional 12-step, that is, AA recovery, the 4th step made reference to inventorying our character defects. There is a modern perspective that looking at defects for women in particular is very off-putting, as women are already tending towards feeling defective, especially if feeling qualified for a program of recovery. Stephanie Covington, PhD, author of A Women's Guide to the 12 Steps and a psychologist in La Jolla, suggested replacing the verbiage defect with defense. Try that on for a moment. Instead of doing a fearless moral inventory of one's defects, what would it feel like to do a fearless moral inventory of one's defenses? Where do your defenses go up? Your defenses are your coping mechanisms, and the very nature of a coping mechanism is it's a way to get through something, to get through it, but it's not necessarily the healthiest way to get through that something. So suggested replacing the verbiage defect with defense. She feels that it's more in line with current recovery to avoid the shame trap that defective may imply and also beyond repair. Defense suggests coping mechanisms gone awry. It also points out that a thorough inventory looks at both assets and liabilities, not just liabilities. I think there's a lot of good in that. After first service this morning, one of our members said, well, a lot of people think that the fourth step is all about character defects. And this person said to me, not really. When you get into the chapter in the big book that really talks about this step, what it suggests first in this step is looking at those areas in our lives where we have resentment. Take that one on for a moment. Wow. To look inside and to ask yourself, who or what in my life do I have the energy of resentment toward? Is it a parent, a teacher, a political party, a group of people, a set of beliefs, an organization, an institution? We know that resentment eats away at us, right, from the inside out. And so this person was saying that this step is really about looking at where we are holding resentments, acknowledging that, and then it is in the further steps that you're actually doing the analysis of the defects. So on to step 5. Step 6 and 7 we'll go through quickly, so don't worry, I'll still have you out on time. My time, but on time. Step 5. We admitted to God, to ourselves, and to another human being the exact nature of our wrongs. Admitted to God, to another human being, to ourselves, the exact nature of our wrongs. There is such cleansing power to the action of confession. Cleansing for the person who is confessing, for sure, and when it's followed with the step of amends to the person that has been wronged, when that's possible and appropriate, it can be extremely healing to the person who was wronged. One of our members shared with me that it took so much courage for him to do step 5 that the very first time he did step 5, he went to a priest, a Catholic-only speaking priest, and did his confession to the Catholic Spanish-speaking priest. Is it really? Said, yeah, he said he knew he was going to have to do it right afterwards, but his first time was just to do it to somebody who didn't speak English. I thought, I like that. I like the honesty of that, the humanness of that, because confession's hard, isn't it? Or am I the only one that feels that it's hard to admit those mistakes publicly to another? And yet, there's so much wisdom in this expression that we are only as sick as our secrets. Only as sick as our secrets. If I can't admit to myself my wrongs, if I am unwilling to acknowledge them to God, and when they're really serious ones, if I'm unwilling to acknowledge them to another, it's going to be awfully hard for me to begin the process of freeing myself from the shame associated with those wrongs. I remember so vividly, I've shared this, but not for a long time. I remember so vividly in ministerial school suffering from 2 versions of an eating disorder. The first, borderline anorexia, to the point that when I came home to marry my husband the first time, my mother, that's a whole other story. You did hear me right. Then my mother took one look at me and said, "What's happened to you?" I was so thin. And then swinging to the complete opposite side, which in some ways was even harder than the borderline anorexia. And that was binge eating and overeating and putting on, 20 or 25 pounds. Still looked kind of normal, certainly looked chubby. Tremendous amount of self-loathing, a tremendous amount of guilt and shame, and an awful lot of fear. Because while an alcoholic recovering from alcoholism or a drug addict recovering from drugs can absolutely live a life without alcohol, without drugs, you cannot live a life without food. And those who have serious eating disorders, there's a whole different dimension of challenge. But I remember so clearly that even worse than the behavior that I knew was damaging me on a variety of levels was the actions were done in secret. John never saw me with a half a gallon of ice cream. He never saw me with a bag of potato chips or any of those other kinds of things that I did. And that part was the hardest part. And it was not until I could call a spade, it was not until I could admit first to myself It's not just what you are doing, but the fact that you are doing it in secret. There's something really wrong with this. There's something really that you need to look at and heal. And then being willing to say to my husband, I am doing these things and I don't fully know why, but I can't hide anymore. And then the absolute fear that once it was out in the open, how was I going to cheat? Right? So I know from personal experience, at least within this context, how difficult it can be to acknowledge and to admit when we're doing something that can be so damaging to ourselves. But I also know that as soon as we are willing to do that and begin to reach out, that there is so much help in the form of people who have gone before us to pave the way, as well as, obviously, our own higher power. So this act of admitting to ourselves where we have gone wrong, where we have gone awry, is a necessary step of healing. And I can't help but bring it home right now to the fact that we are the day before celebrating Martin Luther King Jr. Day. And looking at where we are still in our country, deeply divided around race, really struggling with the issues of race. It didn't happen because of the election. All that did was what? Bring to the surface what's still not yet healed. Can you imagine if as a country or as groups of people, we could somehow take this step together, admit our original sin, which we've done not only to the blacks but to the Native Americans? Can you imagine the catharsis and the beginning of healing that could happen? I can. And in the deepest part of me, I believe that until we can do something akin to that, we are never going to heal from this. I don't know about you, but I want to live in a world where we genuinely care about each other, regardless of our sexual orientation, regardless of the color of our skin, or any of the other things that marginalize us. But it's going to take work to get there, just as it does with these recovery steps. It takes work. You know that, right? Think about the progress you've made in your life through some tough things. It took work, didn't it? And sometimes it was hard, and sometimes it felt like you took 2 steps forward and 1 step back, right? Sometimes you fell, but if you made it through because you didn't let those things stop you. We're only as sick as the secrets we keep. If that is true of us as individuals, it is true of us as families, and it is true of us as cities, it is true of us as organizations, it is true of us as countries. So that was step number 5. And then very briefly and quickly, steps number 6 and 7. In fact, I understand that in AA, or in the Big Book, it's often talked about that these are somewhat forgotten steps because compared to step 4 and 5, they can seem so easy. They're important steps, though. We were entirely ready to have God remove all these defects of character. We were entirely ready to have God remove all these defects of character. Can you feel into that for a moment? Whatever you would label as your personal defects of character, or if you want to use different language, what you would name as your defenses gone awry, or your resentments that are poisoning you from the inside out. Can you feel into what that would be like to have God remove all those defects of character? I think what it would be akin to is having a beautiful stained glass window that has been layered with debris and mud, suddenly wiped clear and clean, so that all its brilliance can shine through. That's your brilliance. It would be shining through, entirely ready to have God remove all these defects of character. And step number 7, humbly asked him to remove these shortcomings. There's a phrase, I think it is in the book of Timothy, but I could be wrong. I know it's in the New Testament. And the statement is, you have not because you ask not. You have not because you ask not. And I think this step is about that. It is about asking whatever you consider to be your higher power, whatever name you give to God, asking God to help you. Asking God to be your partner in your growth and in your journey. We do these kinds of steps together. We do this deep inner work, and we will begin to be transforming our world with love in greater and deeper ways than what we're already doing now. And heaven knows we need to. Namaste.